He casually unearthed an ancient helmet. Now the aliens saw him as their prophesied leader. The merciless sun beat down on Arthur Vega's back as he dug the trench deeper into the alien soil. Sweat trickled down his neck, soaking the collar of his worn combat fatigues, while the protective armor plates strapped to his chest and back, salvaged from a battlefield 3 clicks east, felt like they were cooking him alive. "Hell!" he muttered, driving the shovel into the red-tinted dirt with another powerful thrust. His muscular arms tensed with each movement, the result of years as a mercenary soldier across 12 different planetary systems. This godforsaken planet, Terra's 4 according to military charts, had been known as the graveyard to the Mercs, who'd fought here and were abandoned after the Galactic Coalition declared the territorial dispute between the Kalari and Siuan empires officially resolved. Both sides had exhausted their resources fighting over this worthless rock and agreed to leave it as a demilitarized zone. Now, it was just Arthur and a handful of other mercenaries hired by salvage companies to recover valuable tech before the planet's harsh climate destroyed everything worth selling. "Hey, pretty boy," called Decker from his position 30 meters away. "You planning to dig all the way to the core? Command wants these trenches for cover, not for burial." Arthur flipped him off without looking up. He was just being thorough, unlike some people. Suddenly, his shovel struck something hard with a metallic clang that reverberated up his arms. "What the hell?" He dropped to his knees, brushing away dirt with gloved hands. Something gleamed beneath the soil, not the dull gray of standard military hardware, but something that caught the sunlight with an almost liquid shimmer. Arthur dug his fingers around the edges of the object and pulled it free with surprising ease, as if it were eager to be found. He turned it over in his hands, wiping away the compacted soil. It was a helmet, but unlike any he'd seen before. The metal, if it was metal at all, had a strange, mirror-like quality that reflected the harsh sunlight in prismatic patterns. Intricate symbols were etched across its surface, flowing like water around the contours. "Holy," he whispered, running his thumb over the alien script. "Decker, check this out." But Decker didn't answer. The entire dig site had fallen silent. Arthur looked up to find himself surrounded by figures in armor similar to the helmet he held. Hundreds of them, appearing seemingly from nowhere, standing motionless on the ridges surrounding the excavation site. Their armor gleamed with the same strange, silvery quality. They were humanoid, but definitely not human. Their proportions were slightly off, limbs too long, torsos too narrow, and their skin, visible at the neck and wrists where armor didn't cover, was a pale blue. "What the actual?" Arthur slowly rose to his feet, the helmet still clutched in his hands. As one of the armored figures dropped to its knees, heads bowed in his direction, a slender figure pushed through their ranks. Unlike the warriors, she wore a form-fitting black suit with silver accents that emphasized her graceful curves. Her skin was the color of a clear earth sky, her hair a cascade of silver that caught the light like flowing mercury. When she raised her eyes to meet his, they were a deep, mesmerizing blue. She approached without fear, stopping just a few feet away. Her gaze moved from the helmet in his hands to his face, her expression one of reverence and awe. "The prophecy of the eternal flame speaks truth," she said, her voice melodic despite the translator implant in Arthur's ear converting her words to standard. "You are Keller reborn, the warrior of light who will lead us to victory in the final battle." Arthur blinked. "I'm what now?" She gestured to the helmet. "You have unearthed the crown of ascension. Only the true Keller could find it, for it has remained hidden for 10,000 cycles, waiting for your return." "Look," he said incredulously. "Miss, I am Lixa, first daughter of House Terrace, appointed guardian of the sacred texts." Dropping to one knee before him, she continued, "And you are our prophesied leader." Arthur glanced from the helmet to the kneeling alien warriors surrounding them, then back to the beautiful blue-skinned woman before him. His mercenary instincts screamed that this was trouble, big trouble. But another part of him, the part that had been drifting from one battlefield to another since leaving Earth years ago, felt something else entirely. Curiosity and maybe just a hint of opportunity. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said carefully. "I'm just a human, a mercenary. I was digging a trench and found this by accident." Lixa's lips curved into a knowing smile. "There are no accidents in the great tapestry of fate, Keller. The helmet called to you across the stars." Before Arthur could respond, The ground shook with the unmistakable rumble of approaching ships. He looked up to see three massive vessels descending through the atmosphere, their hulls bearing the same silvery sheen as the armor of the warriors. "The High Council approaches," Lixa said, rising to her feet. "They come to pledge their loyalty to you and to prepare for the coming war." Arthur stared at the helmet in his hands, its surface now pulsing with a faint inner light that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. "Well," he muttered, "this day just got a whole lot more complicated." Arthur stood in what he'd been told was the Chamber of Ascension, aboard the largest of the three vessels, a ship called the Eternal Flame. The room was vast, its ceiling arching high overhead, and the walls were adorned with intricate murals depicting epic battles and cosmic events. The same strange symbols from the helmet appeared throughout, glowing with a soft blue luminescence. "This is insane, huh?" he muttered, turning the helmet over in his hands. Despite his skepticism, he couldn't deny that the craftsmanship was unlike anything he'd seen in his travels across the galaxy. "You doubt your destiny, Keller," Lixa said, entering the chamber with silent grace. She changed from her form-fitting black suit into ceremonial attire, flowing silver robes that somehow managed to accentuate her lithe figure even more than before. "Look, I appreciate the royal treatment, but there's been a mistake. I'm not this Keller person. I'm just Arthur Vega, ex-Earth Defense Force, current gun for hire." "Yet you found the Crown of Ascension," she replied, moving closer. Her voice was reminiscent of something like jasmine, but with an alien undertone that made his pulse quicken. "Our texts speak of a warrior from beyond the stars who would appear when the Voidborn threat returns. Voidborn, ancient enemies of my people, the Tias Val. They consume worlds. Arthur Vega, according to our seers, they approach once more." She reached out, her slender blue fingers tracing the edge of the helmet. "Only Keller can lead us to victory." Their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected jolt through Arthur's body, which he attributed to static electricity, even though the ship's environmental controls seemed far too sophisticated for such mundane phenomena. "Even if I wanted to help, which I'm not saying I do, I know nothing about your people, your enemies, or how to lead an alien army," he said, setting the helmet down on a pedestal of the same silvery material. "I'm a soldier, not a general." Lix's lips curved into a smile that was both knowing and alluring. "The knowledge will come. The crown connects to its wearer, imparting the wisdom of all who wore it before." "That sounds invasive," Arthur laughed. "Where I come from, mysterious artifacts that mess with your head are usually bad news." Arthur stepped away from the helmet, trying to clear his thoughts. The entire situation felt surreal, as if he'd stumbled into someone else's destiny, yet something about the helmet called to him, a faint resonance he couldn't explain. "Your companions have been accommodated in the Eastern Quarter," Lixa said, changing the subject, "though they seem confused by our reverence toward you." Arthur snorted. "That makes two of us." The High Council awaited their audience. They had traveled far to meet the reborn Keller, and if Arthur refused to play along, Lix's expression grew serious. "The prophecy does not speak of refusal. There's always a first time." He crossed his arms, his mercenary instincts kicking in. "What happens if I just walk away?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her blue skin. "Why would you? You're kind, human. You seek purpose, do you not? You travel between stars fighting wars for mere credits. Is that truly fulfilling?" Her words struck a chord. Since leaving Earth, his life had been a series of battlefields and temporary alliances, never staying in one place long enough to form connections. "You don't know anything about me," he said, though the conviction in his voice wavered. "I know more than you think, Arthur Vega." Her hand reached up, fingers lightly touching his cheek, the contact sending another surge through him, more intense than before. "The crown chose you not randomly. It sensed something in you that resonates with our spirit." Despite himself, Arthur leaned slightly into her touch. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, but not unpleasantly so. The closeness between them suddenly seemed charged with something beyond prophecies and ancient enemies. "What if I'm not what you and your people need?" he asked, his voice lowering. "Then we discover that together," she replied, her eyes, those impossibly deep blue orbs holding his gaze. But first you must at least try. The air between them grew heavy with unspoken tension. Arthur became acutely aware of how close they stood, of the subtle curves beneath her ceremonial robes, and of the exotic beauty of her alien features that somehow managed to be both foreign and enticing. "Your people have strange customs," he said, trying to regain his mental footing. "Where I come from, we don't usually appoint leaders based on who finds lost property." Lixa's laugh returned, breaking the tension momentarily. "And where I come from, warriors don't usually question when destiny calls." Her hand dropped from his face, but she didn't step back. "Perhaps we have much to learn from each other." Despite the absurdity of his situation, Arthur found himself intrigued, not just by the mystery of the helmet and the prophecy, but by the enigmatic woman before him. "I'll meet your counsel," he conceded finally, "but I'm not making any promises about leading armies or fulfilling prophecies." Lixa's smile widened. "A beginning is all I ask." She turned toward the chamber entrance, then glanced back over her shoulder. "For now," she said softly, "come with me." As they left the chamber, Arthur couldn't help but notice the graceful sway of her hips beneath the flowing robes. Whatever cosmic joke had landed him in this situation, at least the company was proving interesting. Inside the High Council chamber, tension filled the air. 7 thoughtful elders sat in a semicircle. Their blue skin had weathered to a deeper azure with age, and their silver hair was elaborately braided with metallic ornaments that clinked softly as they moved. The human who had found the crown now announced himself. "I am High Elder Ren," his voice resonant despite his apparent age. "We have awaited this moment for generations." Arthur stood tall, his military training kicking in despite his discomfort. "With respect, Elder, I'm still not convinced I'm your prophesied leader," he said. A murmur rippled through the council. Lixa, standing beside him, tensed slightly. "The crown chooses," said a female elder to Ren's right. "It has never been wrong. Perhaps a demonstration would ease your doubts." Ren suggested, "The crown contains not just knowledge but power. Would you consent to a trial?" Before Arthur could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber. A young warrior burst through the doors, his armor scratched and smoking. "Voidborn scout, they've breached the lower atmosphere," he gasped. The council erupted into controlled chaos. Ren turned to Arthur, his expression grave. "It seems your trial comes sooner than expected." "Keller, I'm not," Arthur began, then sighed. "Fine, what are we dealing with?" Lixa touched a panel on her wrist, projecting a holographic display. 3 scout vessels, small but deadly, heading for the excavation site. My team is still down there." Arthur's eyes widened with concern. "Then we must move quickly." "Lixa," he said, "the armory is this way." 20 minutes later, Arthur found himself in a sleek interceptor streaking toward the planet's surface. The ship was unlike any human craft he'd piloted, more intuitive, responding almost to his thoughts rather than manual controls. Lixa sat beside him, her ceremonial robes exchanged for battle armor that hugged her form like a second skin. "The scouts are likely searching for the crown's energy signature," she explained. "They've hunted it for millennia." "So I dug up the cosmic equivalent of a homing beacon," Arthur grimaced. "Great. The crown was hidden for a reason." "Its power is unmatched in the wrong hands. It could destroy worlds," she replied. "Yeah, I've heard that story before." Arthur banked the interceptor sharply as they entered the atmosphere. "So what's the plan? I'm not wearing that thing until I know exactly what it does." Lixa's lips quirked in a half-smile. "First, we save your friends, then perhaps you'll be more inclined to embrace your role." "Isn't that what you'd expect from your prophesied leader?" He teased for a moment before Lixa's gaze softened into a warm smile. The landing was rough but effective. The interceptor touched down just long enough for them to deploy. Arthur hit the ground running, his mercenary instincts taking over as he sprinted toward his trapped comrades. Lixa moved like liquid lightning beside him, wielding a weapon that resembled a spear but crackled with energy. When the first Voidborn turned toward them, she struck with precision, the spear piercing its shadowy form, which dissolved with an unearthly shriek. Arthur reached Decker's position, sliding into the trench beside his fellow mercenaries. "What the hell is happening?" Decker asked, eyes wild. "One minute we're digging, the next. These things are hunting us like animals." Long story, short version. I found an alien artifact, and now the bad guys want it, Arthur replied, checking his borrowed weapon. This will work better than your pulse rifles. Aim for the center mass, he demonstrated. Lixa vaulted into the trench beside them with graceful ease, dispatching another Voidborn with a fluid thrust of her spear. "Who's the blue girl?" Decker asked, momentarily distracted by Lixa's prowess. "Also a long story," Arthur replied, rising to fire at an approaching shadow. His weapon discharged a burst of silver energy that tore through the creature. "Follow our lead and stay close," Arthur ordered. The battle was brief but intense. Working together, they eliminated the Voidborn scouts, though not before one mercenary took a glancing blow that left his arm blackened and withered. As the last enemy fell, Arthur knelt beside the injured man. "Can you help him?" he asked. Elixa examined the wound with a grim expression. "The corruption spreads quickly. We must get him to the medical bay aboard the Eternal Flame." They retreated to the interceptor with the injured merc supported between Decker and Arthur. As they lifted off, Obsidian scout ships began to retreat as well. "They're reporting back," Lixa said, her voice tight. "This is only the beginning." Arthur watched the dark vessels disappear into the upper atmosphere. "How much time do we have?" "Days, perhaps no more," she replied, her deep blue eyes growing intense. "Now, do you understand why we need Keller?" With adrenaline still coursing through his veins in the close confines of the interceptor, Arthur became acutely aware of Lixa's proximity. The way her armor accentuated every curve, the slight flush that darkened her blue skin to indigo, and the exotic scent of ozone and mysterious flowers. "I understand you need help," he said finally. "And I'm not in the habit of walking away from a fight, especially when innocent lives are at stake." Something passed between them, a current of understanding that transcended their different species. Lixa's hand found his on the control panel, her cool fingers intertwining with his warm ones. "Then you will try," she whispered. Arthur glanced back at his injured comrade, catching Decker's questioning expression, then returned his gaze to Lixa's hopeful face. "I'll try," he agreed, "but I'm doing this my way, not because of some prophecy." Her smile was radiant. "That is all I ask for." Later, in a circular chamber deep within the Eternal Flame, the walls pulsed with the same silvery light as the helmet. The crown of Ascension rested on a pedestal at the center of the room. 3 days had passed since the skirmish with the Voidborn scouts, 3 days of preparation, planning, and increasingly heated debates in the War Council. Arthur's fellow mercenaries had been integrated into the Terra's full forces, though not without friction. "Remind me again, why can't we just shoot these Voidborn bastards with bigger guns?" Arthur asked, eyeing the glowing crystal warily. "The Voidborn are merely vessels," Lixa said patiently. "Their true form exists partially in another dimension. The crown allows its wearer to perceive and affect that dimension, interdimensional warfare, because regular warfare wasn't complicated enough." Despite his sarcasm, Arthur began to accept the gravity of the situation. The injured mercenary, Powell, had barely survived. His arm withered beyond saving, even with the Terrace healers doing all they could. "The ritual is intimate," Lixa continued, her voice dropping slightly. "I will guide you through it as your anchor. Without me, you could lose yourself in the memories of past wearers." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Intimate, how exactly?" "A deeper indigo flush spreads across my cheeks when our minds merge. It is not unlike what humans might call a spiritual union, so you'll be in my head, reading my thoughts, and I in yours," she explained. "It requires absolute trust." Arthur considered this. Over the past few days, he'd come to respect Lixa, her intelligence, her combat skills, her unwavering dedication to her people, and there was something else, something that made his pulse quicken whenever she entered a room. "Will it hurt?" he asked finally. "It can be intense but not painful," she reassured him. "Are you afraid, Arthur Vega?" He laughed nervously, a mix of terror and anticipation in his voice. "Terrified but not of the pain." Her expression softened. "Then what of what you might see in there?" She tapped his temple. "Not all of my memories are pleasant, nor are mine. War leaves scars on all who fight." The air between them thickened with unspoken tension. Arthur was acutely aware of the subtle scent that always surrounded her. "Let's do this," he said, "but if you start poking around my embarrassing childhood memories, I'm out." Her laugh was musical. "I promise to respect your privacy, mostly." Soon the War Council convened. Arthur, with the memory shard now integrated at the base of his skull, a process far less painful than he'd anticipated, stood before the assembled Terrace commanders and his own mercenary team. "The Voidborn fleet will reach us within 48 hours, he announced, projecting the tactical display that Lixa had helped him prepare. "Our advanced scouts have already reported our position and strength." Elder Kell, one of the more conservative council members, suggested, "Then we should evacuate." Arthur countered, "They're tracking the Crown's energy signature. They'll follow us wherever we go. Then we fight." Commander Thays, the Terrace military leader, interjected, "We have always fought, not as you've always done, Arthur. Your traditional battle formations are predictable. The Voidborn know your tactics." A murmur of discontent rippled through the Terrace side of the chamber. "What would you suggest, human?" Thays asked, his tone bordering on insubordination. Arthur gestured to Decker, who stepped forward. "My team specializes in guerrilla tactics, small, mobile strike teams instead of mass formations, hit and run instead of direct confrontation." "Cowardly tactics," someone muttered. "Effective tactics," Decker shot back. "We've taken down forces 10 times our size with these methods." "The prophecy speaks of Keller leading us to glorious battle," Thays insisted, "not skulking in shadows." "The prophecy can kiss my ass," Arthur said bluntly. "I'm interested in winning, not glory." The chamber fell silent. Lixa, standing beside High Elder Wren, suppressed a smile. "Perhaps there is wisdom in the human approach," Wren carefully added. "Commander Thays, you will incorporate these guerrilla tactics into our battle plans." Thays looked as if he had swallowed something sour, but he nodded stiffly. "The bonding ritual will take place tonight," Wren continued. "By tomorrow, Keller will have full access to the Crown's power." Decker approached Arthur. "You sure about this, Vega? These blue folks are putting a lot of faith in some ancient hat." "Not much choice at this point," Lixa entered, now wearing ceremonial robes of shimmering silver that left her shoulders bare. "Are you prepared?" "As I'll ever be," Arthur replied, having changed into the garments she provided, loose, fitting pants of a silky material and nothing else. He felt odd, vulnerable. "The ritual requires physical contact," Lixa explained, approaching him. "The memory shard will facilitate our mental connection, but our bodies must also be aligned." Arthur raised an eyebrow, nodding the indigo flush returning to her cheeks. "In my culture, the mind and body are not separate entities. One affects the other." She stepped closer so that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her hands rose to rest lightly on his bare chest. "Your heart beats faster than ours," she observed. "Is it fear or something else?" "Definitely something else," Arthur admitted, swallowing hard, her lips curved in a smile that sent heat coursing through him. "Good, fear would make the connection difficult." Her fingers traced patterns on his skin. "The ritual often creates intense sensations. It is natural." After the ritual, his voice sounded rougher than he intended. Her eyes met his, pupils dilated. "It is for us to decide," she confirmed softly. "Our minds will temporarily merge. It is not unlike a spiritual union." They knelt before the pedestal where the crown rested, side by side. Lixa took his hands in hers as their knees touched. "Close your eyes," she whispered. "Feel the connection forming between us, between you and the crown." As Arthur closed his eyes, the memory at the base of his skull began to warm. He felt Lixa's consciousness brush against his, at first tentative, then more boldly, until he wasn't just himself anymore. He was also her and others, echoes of past wearers, their experiences flowing through him like a river of light and sensation. Through it all, Lixa anchored him. Her presence remained constant amid the flood of memories, her thoughts entwining with his in an intimacy that no physical touch could match. When their lips finally met, neither was sure who moved first. It felt like the natural conclusion to a sentence they'd been writing together since the moment he unearthed the crown. Arthur woke with a gasp, his mind buzzing with information that hadn't been there before. Battle strategies from 10,000 years ago, the molecular structure of voidborn armor, the taste of a fruit from a planet long destroyed. the sensation of Lixa's skin in the darkness. After the ritual, he sat up, sheets sliding from his bare chest. The quarters he'd been assigned aboard the Eternal Flame were spacious but alien, curved walls and furniture that seemed to grow from the floor rather than be placed upon it. Lixa slept beside him, her silver hair spread across the pillow, her blue skin luminous in the dim light. The events after the ritual rushed back to him in a flood of sensory memories, the way their mental connection had naturally extended to physical intimacy, the surprising compatibility of their bodies despite their different species, and the whispered confessions in the aftermath. As if sensing his gaze, her eyes fluttered open. "Your thoughts are loud," she murmured, stretching languidly. "Sorry, still getting used to all of this." He tapped his temple. "It's like having a library installed in my brain overnight," she smiled, propping herself up on one elbow. "The knowledge of all previous wearers, how does it feel? Overwhelming." He reached out, tracing the curve of her shoulder with his fingertips. "Not as overwhelming as this," he murmured. Her skin flushed a deeper indigo, an endearing sight he had come to love. "The ritual often creates strong bonds between participants, but this is definitely more." Leaning down to kiss her lightly, he added, "No regrets." Her hand came up to cup his face. "Though I wonder what your people would think of such a union." Arthur laughed. "Humans have a long history of falling for people they shouldn't. It's practically a tradition." A chime interrupted them, the ship's communication system. "Keller," came Commander Thays' formal, stiff voice, "your presence is requested in the training arena. The integration exercise begins in 1 hour." "Acknowledged," Arthur replied, then sighed as the communication ended. "Duty calls." Lixa sat up fully, the sheet falling away to reveal the elegant lines of her torso. "He doesn't approve of your methods. He doesn't approve of me," Arthur corrected, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "Can't say I blame him. Some human shows up, finds a helmet, and suddenly he's taking orders from me." "Not just any human," Lixa said softly, moving closer. "The crown chose you. That means something to our people, though perhaps not to Terra's 4. "Terrestrial traditions are stubborn," Arthur replied. "I expected Keller to be Terra's 4's own, but what about you? What did you expect?" Her eyes grew serious. "I expected to serve Keller. I did not expect to care for the man who wears the crown." The simple honesty in her words touched him deeply. For years, he had drifted from one battlefield to another, never finding a place that felt like home. Now, in the most unlikely place, he'd found someone who saw past the mercenary to the man beneath. "We should get dressed," he said reluctantly. "I have a feeling today is going to be interesting." In the vast training arena within the belly of the Eternal Flame, Terrace warriors in sleek armor stood in formation on one side, while Arthur's scruffy but determined mercenary team waited on the other. "Today, we become one fighting force," Arthur announced, his voice carrying across the space. The crown of ascension now rested on his head, its weight surprisingly comfortable. "The Voidborn, whether human or Terrace Val, they'll kill you just the same," he said, gesturing as holographic displays activated around the arena showing tactical simulations he had prepared using the crown's ancient knowledge. "Traditional Terrace formations are powerful but predictable. Human guerrilla tactics are effective but often lack cohesion for large-scale battle. We're going to take the best of both." Commander Thays stepped forward. "And how do you propose to accomplish this fusion?" "By pairing each human with a Terrace squad," Arthur explained. "My people will teach yours to think unpredictably, to use terrain and misdirection. Your people will teach mine to coordinate their movements within a larger strategy." Murmurs rippled through both groups, some skeptical, others intrigued. "Impossible," declared Thays. "Our warriors are trained from childhood. Your humans cannot learn our techniques in a day." "They don't need to," Arthur countered, gesturing toward Decker. "My team specializes in guerrilla tactics. We hit and run instead of engaging in direct confrontation." A voice from the crowd retorted, "The prophecy speaks of Keller leading us to glorious battle." "Glory, I'm interested in winning, not in glory," Arthur said bluntly. The chamber fell silent. Lixa, standing beside High Elder Wren, suppressed a smile. "Perhaps there is wisdom in the human approach." Wren added carefully, "Commander Thays, you will incorporate these guerrilla tactics into our battle plans." Thays looked as if he had swallowed something sour, but he nodded stiffly. Later, the War Council prepared for the bonding ritual. Decker approached Arthur. "You sure about this, Vega? These blue folks are putting a lot of faith in some ancient hat." "Not much choice at this point," Arthur replied. Lixa, now dressed in combat armor that blended traditional terrace design with practical modifications suggested by the mercenaries, stepped forward. "Are you prepared?" she asked softly. "As I'll ever be," Arthur answered. The training session that followed was chaotic at first. Cultural misunderstandings abounded. Terrace warriors were offended by the mercenaries' casual profanity, while the humans were frustrated by the aliens' rigid adherence to protocol. "No, no, no," Decker was saying to a Terrace squad leader. "If the enemy expects you to go right, you go left. If they expect you to attack, you retreat. Always do the unexpected." A warrior protested. "That dishonors the confrontation. A true fighter faces his enemy directly." "A smart fighter lives to fight another day," Decker retorted. Meanwhile, Powell, whose withered arm had been replaced with a Terrace prosthetic, demonstrated human hand signals to his team. 2 taps meant danger ahead. A closed fist meant stop. 1 tap meant, "I need covering fire." Arthur moved among them, the crown enhancing his perception so he could see patterns forming, connections being made where there was friction. He redirected efforts where there was progress and encouraged Lixa, who remained by his side, a presence both comforting and energizing. Occasionally, their hands brushed, their eyes met, and the memory of their night together flashed between them like an electric current. As the training session ended, a sudden surge of energy emanated from the crown. Images flooded Arthur's mind, the Voidborn fleet drawing closer than expected, a weakness in their formation, an opportunity. He staggered slightly, and Lixa steadied him. "What is it?" she asked. "The crown, it's showing me something," he gasped. "The Voidborn, they're coming faster than we thought, but there's a chance, a strategy." Her eyes widened. "The power is manifesting. This is what the prophecy foretold." Arthur straightened, his mind racing with possibilities. "Get the War Council together now. I know how we're going to win this." Elder Kell's voice rose in disbelief. "You want us to do what?" "Fight them on the ground," Arthur repeated calmly, the crown of ascension gleaming on his head. "Not in space." The council chamber erupted in protest. Commander Thays slammed his fist on the table. "Our fleet is our greatest advantage. Abandoning it for ground combat is madness." "The Voidborn expect a space battle," Arthur explained. "Our ships outnumber theirs 3-1, but on the ground, with the right strategy, we can negate that advantage." He manipulated the hologram, zooming in on the excavation site where he had found the crown. "This area is rich in minerals that disrupt Voidborn energy signatures. That's why the crown was hidden here. If we lure their forces to this location, their connection to their dimensional home will weaken." Lixa stepped forward, her eyes meeting his in perfect understanding. The mental link they had formed during the ritual had only grown stronger. "The prophecy speaks of the final battle occurring where the crown was found," she said. "This is why High Elder Ren." Ren stroked his long, silver beard thoughtfully. "There is wisdom in Keller's plan, but how do we lure them to this specific location?" Arthur smiled and tapped the crown on his head. "The plan is set in motion. Long-range sensors detected a Voidborn advance force approaching, a dozen ships breaking away from the main fleet to establish a beachhead. They're testing our defenses," he announced to the assembled commanders in the Eternal Flames Tactical Center. "This is our chance to prove our combined tactics work and to spring the first part of our trap." The newly integrated human terrace teams moved into position around the excavation site. Arthur watched from a command post as Decker led his mixed squad to the northern ridge. "Remember," Arthur's voice carried through the comm systems, "fight unpredictably but fight together. The terrace warriors have strength and discipline. The humans have adaptability and cunning. Use both." Lixa, now dressed in combat armor that matched his own, a blend of traditional terrace design with practical modifications, stood beside him. "The crown is revealing more to you," she observed, not as a question but as a statement. "It's showing you not just battle plans but history, your people's history and mine." Before Arthur could elaborate, Sensor blips indicated dark shapes descending through the atmosphere, void-borne landing craft with obsidian hulls absorbing rather than reflecting light. "Here they come," Arthur announced. "Stick to the plan, let them think they're pushing us back." The battle erupted across the excavation site. Void-borne troops, shadowy humanoid figures with too many joints and eyes that glowed sickly green poured from their ships. They moved with unnatural speed. Their limbs sometimes appeared to pass through solid matter. The combined human-Terras forces engaged them with disciplined chaos. Where the Terras warriors had traditionally formed defensive lines, they now broke into smaller units, each led by a human directing their movements with hand signals and quick commands. They were adapting to the new tactics. Commander Thays reported from his position on the eastern flank, his voice grudgingly respectful. "Their formations are beginning to fall apart." "Fall back to position 2, Arthur ordered as the Voidborn pressed forward. "Make them think they're winning." The retreat was orderly yet appeared desperate to any observer. The Voidborn pursued eagerly, pushing deeper into the mineral-rich terrain around the excavation site. "Energy readings from the enemy are fluctuating," Lixa reported. "The minerals are affecting them." Arthur nodded in satisfaction. "Spring the trap." Hidden emitters activated throughout the battlefield, generating a field that further disrupted the Voidborn's dimensional connection. The shadowy figures faltered, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. Now Arthur commanded the human Terras forces to pivot with practiced precision, turning their retreat into a devastating counterattack. Caught off guard, the weakened Voidborn advanced force crumbled. As the last enemy fell, a cheer rose from the combined troops. Arthur allowed himself a moment of pride before turning to Lixa. "It worked," he said simply. "Yes," she agreed, her eyes shining with more than just victory. "But the main fleet will be more cautious now." Tapping the crown, Arthur added, "There's something I need to show you." The crown revealed a vision of the original Keller. In a private chamber they shared, a holographic projection from the crown filled the center of the room. It showed a man unmistakably human, standing among ancient Terras warriors. "The original Keller was human," Arthur said quietly. "The crown didn't choose me by accident. Our peoples have been connected for millennia." Lixa stared at the projection in wonder. "This changes everything. Our historians believed that humans and Terras warriors fought the Voidborn separately. But long ago, when the Voidborn were defeated, they retreated to their dimension, vowing to return. The human Keller stayed with the Terras, became one of them." She paused. "He fell in love with a Terras woman. Their eyes met across generations, and the truth became legend." Arthur continued softly. "The human origin of Keller was forgotten, but the crown remembered." Lixa moved closer, her hand finding his. "Is that why our bodies are compatible? Why our minds linked so easily during the ritual?" "The crown suggests our species may share distant ancestry," Arthur said. "Or perhaps the original Keller and his partner had children, creating a genetic link between our peoples." The implications hung in the air, not just for them personally, but for both their species. "We should tell the council," Lixa said finally. "Tomorrow," Arthur agreed. "Tonight we prepare for the main fleet." He pulled her closer. "Tonight I want to be just Arthur, not Keller, just a man with the woman I'm falling for." Her blue skin flushed a deeper indigo. "I think that can be arranged," she murmured. As they came together, the crown on the bedside table pulsed with approving light, as if the spirits of those who came before, including the original human Keller and his Terras love, were giving their blessing to this echo of ancient history. Outside, the stars shimmered with the approaching Voidborn fleet. Tomorrow would bring the true test of their strategy, their forces, and their leaders. But tonight belonged to them alone, a human and a Terras warrior bridging worlds, just as their ancestors had done millennia ago. Before dawn broke over the excavation site, bathing the assembled forces in golden light, Arthur stood at the forward command post. The crown of ascension gleamed on his head as he surveyed the battlefield beside him. Lixa monitored the approaching Voidborn fleet, hundreds of obsidian ships descending through the atmosphere like a storm of black tears. "They're coming in exactly as you predicted," she said in a tone of wonder. Arthur nodded after revealing the truth about the original Keller to the High Council. Everything had changed. The Terras no longer saw humans as strange outsiders, but as long-lost kin, Even Commander Thays knelt before Arthur, pledging his loyalty not just to the crown, but to the man wearing it. The main force will land here, Arthur indicated the center of the excavation site. They think they're coming for the crown, but they're really walking into our trap. Decker approached in his human mercenary gear, now supplemented with pieces of Terrace armor. The teams are in position, he said. Powell reports the emitters are at full charge. Good, Arthur said, clasping his friend's shoulder. Never thought we'd end up fighting alongside blue aliens against interdimensional shadows. Did you ever think you'd be digging trenches for this? Decker grinned. Best shovel stroke of my life. The ground trembled as the first Voidborn ships landed. Unlike the advance force, these were massive carriers, disgorging hundreds of shadow warriors. At their center stood a towering figure, twice the height of the others, with a crown of writhing darkness atop its elongated head, the Void Sovereign. Lixa whispered, their leader. Arthur felt the crown pulse in response, as if recognizing an ancient enemy. Knowledge flooded his mind. This was how it had been before millennia ago when the first Keller had faced the same foe. Activate the emitters, he commanded. Hidden devices powered up, creating a web of energy that disrupted the Voidborn's dimensional connection. The Shadow Warriors faltered, but less dramatically than the advanced force had, for they had adapted, shielding themselves. The minerals and emitters are having less effect than anticipated, reported Thays from his position. Proceed to Phase 2, Arthur ordered. Draw them to the central chamber. The combined human-Terrace forces engaged the enemy, fighting with a seamless integration of styles. Humans directed quick, unpredictable strikes while Terrace warriors provided disciplined support. They gradually fell back, leading the Voidborn deeper into the excavation site toward the chamber where Arthur had first found the crown. The Void Sovereign followed, its attention fixed on Arthur and the crown he wore. It seemed to speak, though no sound emerged from its shadowy form, only a pressure in the mind like the memory of a scream. You wear what is not yours, human. Arthur felt Lixa tense beside him. It can speak directly to our thoughts. The crown is exactly where it belongs, he replied aloud, standing his ground as his forces continued their strategic retreat around him. Just as it was when your kind was defeated, the Void Sovereign's psychic presence murmured, you had surprise, now we know your tricks. With a gesture, the Sovereign sent a wave of darkness that pulsed outward, disabling several emitters. The Voidborn troops surged forward with renewed strength. Fall back to the chamber, Arthur ordered. They retreated into the underground chamber where the crown had lain hidden for 10,000 years. The Voidborn pursued, led by the Void Sovereign, drawn by the crown's energy and the promise of millennia-old revenge. As the last of their forces entered the chamber, Arthur gave the signal. Hidden charges detonated, collapsing the entrance tunnels, not to trap the enemy, for shadow warriors could phase through solid matter, but to activate the final phase of their plan. The chamber's walls, lined with mineral that disrupted Voidborn energy, were now exposed. At the center stood an ancient device, a portal mechanism that the crown had revealed in Arthur's visions. Lixa, activate the device, Arthur shouted as Commander Thays led the defense against the disoriented Voidborn. The chamber filled with silver light as the portal began to form, a gateway back to the Voidborn's dimension. The Void Sovereign roared in their minds, unleashing a psychic assault that staggered even the strongest warriors. You cannot banish us forever. Not forever, Arthur agreed, stepping forward. The crown blazed with power. For just long enough, he raised his hands, channeling the crown's energy into the portal. The gateway expanded its pull, drawing Voidborn warriors toward it. Their shadowy forms stretched and distorted as they fought against its force. The Void Sovereign, anchoring itself to this dimension by sheer will, reached for Arthur with elongated limbs. If we go, you go with us, human. Lixa moved with lightning speed, her spear slicing through the Sovereign's arm before it could grasp Arthur. Not this time, she snarled. The Void Sovereign howled in rage and pain as the portal pulsed, intensifying its pull. One by one, the Voidborn were sucked through, returning to their home dimension. Arthur felt the crown drawing more power from him than ever before, the strain threatening to overwhelm his consciousness. Lixa's hand found his, their fingers intertwining as her strength flowed into him through their mental bond. Together, with one final surge of power, they forced the Sovereign through the portal. With a thunderclap of energy, the portal vanished, and Arthur collapsed to his knees, the crown going dark on his head. Lixa caught him before he could fall. Arthur looked up at her, exhausted but smiling. "We did it." The portal closed, leaving the chamber in sudden silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors. 3 months later, Arthur stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Flame, watching as a fleet of Earth ships approached the Terrace home. After the battle, he had sent a message to the Galactic Coalition revealing the ancient connection between humans and Terrace warriors. The response was swift and enthusiastic, an official diplomatic mission to establish formal relations. Nervously, Lixa joined him at the viewport. Dressed in formal robes befitting her new position as ambassador to Earth, her silver hair was elaborately braided with symbols of both cultures. "Not every day you introduce your species to their long-lost cousins," Arthur admitted with a small smile. She leaned against him. "The High Council has approved the treaty terms," she said, "and your coalition seems equally eager. Terrace technology combined with human innovation will revolutionize space travel within a decade." Nearby, the Crown of Ascension sat in a display case, its purpose fulfilled for this generation. Arthur no longer needed to wear it, though the knowledge it had imparted remained with him. "Have you decided, Lixa?" she asked softly, the question lingering between them. They had both been circling the issue for weeks. Arthur turned to face her fully. "About staying." She nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral but unable to hide her hope. "Not after all we've shared. I sent Decker and the others home with a year's worth of combat pay." Arthur grinned. "Powell says the Terrace medics can do more for his arm than anyone in human space. And you." Her voice was soft. "I want to stay. Not just as a liaison, the Crown showed me one last vision before the battle ended. A glimpse of the future where humans and Terrace warriors work together across the galaxy. Peace instead of war, creation instead of destruction, a worthy vision."